Let's start with a very interesting Reddit story from Time's Ugly Stepchild. You are just cattle to me. This story goes back pretty much 20 years now. To set the scene, I was working for a then cable TV company. The call center I was working at had been filled with guys poached from dial-up support companies countrywide to support this new superfast broadband that was being trailed in country for the first time. 500K connections. Woohoo! I say this because that meant our call center at the time was full of some of the best support engineers anywhere in country. Some of the most intelligent people I have ever known. Anyway, after about a year there, 4 of us we asked to look into complaints sent to the managing director, hereafter known as Big Boss, about the service. Mostly, these were the original brand Karens of the day, but occasionally the customer complaining was someone rather important, and they needed the special touch, so to speak. Turns out the 4 of us has quite different skills, but complemented each other perfectly, and before long, we were firm friends with the Big Boss's personal assistant at head office, and had very good reputations to boot, after some devilishly difficult issues. Oh yeah, this is before Google, so being good meant you knew your not just how to look it up. It was a great place to work. Turnover was practically zero. The fact all our staff were experienced before getting to us meant we knew what we were getting into. Then came the new director, hereafter referred to as A-hole. A-hole had come from another call center in the company, a customer services call center. He was also completely inept, technically. Seriously, this guy once told me that directors don't use Excel and only Word, so I needed to copy all the spreadsheets into Word so he could modify the content and pass off his bullcrap figures, showing all was well. He didn't understand how Excel worked as it transpired. Anyway, all was not well. In the short time he'd been there, he had alienated most of the best staff. He tried to turn the staff into script monkeys as he wanted every case fixed in X minutes. We were rebuilding TCP/IP stacks, hacking registries. Hell, we even talked a few people through Win98 rebuilds. You ever tried to talk your gran through changing a ringtone over phone? Now try imagining getting gran to rebuild Windows after Macintosh and Spymantech competed to see which could screw up her machine faster. Now try doing it in 10 minutes, or get hauled into A-hole's office to be screamed at for up his figures. Morale was utterly obliterated, and we started losing good people. Head office knew something was wrong, so they sent word down the line that the big boss was coming for a meet and greet. That message went through A-hole, so, of course, on that day, some of the more vocal employees were scheduled off. Those selected to meet the big boss were, I think the nice word is, sycophants, or people who were instructed what to say and followed out of fear. Upshot, Big Boss went away, thinking all was well, and there must be some other reason for the issues on site. My breakpoint came when my team was given an impossible task. By this point, I'd already handed in my 30 days. Was about to become a dad, so needed to get a proper career going. He wanted a flow diagram of every possible fault we were dealing with and its solution. And he wanted it all on a single piece of A3 paper. We objected, he demanded, we failed. We got reamed. Our manager got reamed, and let me tell you, she defended the hell out of us. We tried in vain to explain the nature of the calls, to explain that the reason we paid these very clever people to do this job was because they were essentially playing tech support to a nation of people who had turned a computer on for the first time ever today, did something they didn't know was stupid and broke their machine. That means their internet didn't work, hence, our problem. His response, at a volume comparable with a tornado jet taking off at full burner. I don't let me get this through your heads. You are nothing, and I am a director, and when I tell you to do something, you do it, or I will fire every single one of you. I can replace any one of you anytime I want, because you are nothing but cattle. Now get the in my office. I went home livid. My girlfriend at the time, pregnant with our first, worked in the same office, so while I was getting out, she would have to continue deal with A-hole. Knowing how he intended to treat my friends and family, I needed to do something. I didn't have a clue what I could do. Friday, I go into work, ostensibly to say my goodbyes and do exit interview, paperwork and such. One of those goodbyes was a phone call to Big Boss's PA. Me saying goodbye was a shock, because I'd been expressly forbidden to tell them over the previous month by, you guessed it, a-hole. She wanted to know why I was leaving. I told her. She asked me if I minded her telling Big Boss what I'd said. I'll be honest, I didn't seriously believe anything would come of it, but what the hell, I thought. Sure. I'll get back to you soon. And she's gone. 20 minutes later, she calls me and says, Big Boss wants to talk to me, so can he have my personal mobile number? I give it, and sure enough, minutes later, the big man himself calls. The next 30 minutes is spent detailing why I was leaving, why we had lost nearly 100 people already, and had 18 resignations that week alone. Why didn't I hear about this when I was there the other week? So I related the little personnel shuffle and the threats. This was my moment, and I tell you, I carped the hell out of that diem. Me, look, Big Boss, I get all you have is my word, and I could be just some disgruntled dipshit, but my friends and family are going to have to work here after I've gone. And by family, I mean my pregnant girlfriend, so I have to do something. If you want to find out the truth, here is what you do. Turn up on site unannounced for a day. Send out your own email to the site as soon as you arrive, giving no time for a-hole and his cronies to get to anyone. Tell them to come to you if they have any concerns. Here is a list of people that should corroborate much of what I've said. The rest, it's up to them if they want to do something. Then decide if I'm a After a bit more chatting, the call ended, and I went back to say goodbye to everyone. I told a few people, including my manager, what I'd done, and told them if Big Boss did turn up, to get in there and tell him what's going on. Then I bid them all farewell, and said I would see them all at the mass leaving do at the end of the month. I'm at my new job the Tuesday after, and I get a text from the GF. Holy Big Boss is here unannounced. More texts from other ex-colleagues saying pretty much the same thing. From what I gathered afterwards, Big Boss did exactly what I suggested, and it played out pretty much as I thought it might. There was a queue, a long one. That night, a-hole was summoned to Big Boss's impromptu office, and after that meeting, he went home. He was never seen again. I did get a call from Big Boss. He can't discuss details, but I'll be very pleased to know leaving do was pretty cool too, I think. On entry, I was told I wouldn't be paying for a single drink that night. From there, my memory goes from fuzzy to total blank. The hangover the next 2 days was brutal, but totally worth it. Update. A few people have asked if we knew any more on a-hole after the fact, so I went looking. I went looking again on things like LinkedIn and such, and after a lot of looking, fairly common name, I bashed in the right combo of name and company and found him. LinkedIn confirm he lost his job in 2001 when this all happened. He eventually found a new job in 2002, but it seems he bounced through a few companies with pretty big gaps in his work history. Currently seeking new opportunities for the last 4 years. The revenge was perfect, and it was executed strategically. The arrogant director was humiliated and taken down, ruining his reputation and career at the same time. OP did a wonderful job by teaching a bitter lesson to the arrogant director. The next story is from prestigious_issue 330. Terror neighbours make our lives hell. Returned the favour by getting them raided. As we found out that we'd be expecting, not 1 but 2 kids, we knew we had to move to a real house with more space. At the time, we were still living in a 1-bedroom studio 1 up from the ground floor, with its only entrance being a metal fire escape. Stairs. Not ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone to live with 2 small babies. So we found a privately leased house that was newly renovated and had all the room and a large garden we were looking for. Signed the lease and immediately collected the keys. As the owner drove off, the woman next door comes up to me, immediately demanding we not make noise before noon, as her BF works nights and sleeps in, and a whole bunch of other do's and don'ts. So right at the bat knew, Trouble incoming. As the house was fully renovated and not much had to be done, we were like, don't poke the bear, we'll do the things that make noise after noon. We moved in after 2 weeks and the whole street was warm and welcoming. My wife was almost due, giving birth to my twin daughters and some offer help with anything we needed. Real kind people. They also told us about our neighbours. Nobody liked them. He was a big bully and got into arguments with everybody. Also were known as radio pirates, as in illegal broadcasting on radio with all Dutch bangers. This music is just terror on your ears and possibly used on terrorists on black sites, which went alongside them partying Thursday, Sunday till 5 in the morning. Loud music, constant yelling, always drunken, etc. Really something to look forward to when moving in, certainly with 2 babies on the way. The partying began immediately, full blast. Real classy for someone demanding to be quiet when douchebag needs his beauty sleep. Then one day, my FIL came to put new grass in. He has his trailer parked at the back of our houses, which is public space. Not according to him though. Know that exact spot where the trailer, full with grass sods, quite heavy stuff, was parked was his spot, and we had to move the trailer. Not going to happen, as I was not planning to walk all the way around the house with the sods. He gets angry right away and demanded me to move it. I told him to go himself. I was done with him already then and there. I'm also a ginger, so besides having no soul, I do have a temper, which is always in check until you provoke me repeatedly. Anyone who knows me will tell you that you really had to make an effort for that to happen. We went on working, and end of day comes when my FIL wants to leave. Hooks up the trailer, and bam, there was douchebag, telling him off, yelling, it's his spot, and he better does not do this again or else. Mess with me all you want, I can handle it. But what you don't do is threaten my family. I ran outside and told him in no uncertain terms to back off, or he'll be the sorry one. Total bluff on my side. Yes, I have that temper, but I'm not impressively built and have no hidden fighting skills. I do fight dirty. He backs off, FIL leaves, and I go inside where I find my wife crying. She got scared of him maybe doing something to her father, and or me, and this is something we don't need right now. Combined with hormones from being pregnant, and you can paint that picture. So I'm even more pissed, but had to promise not to act on anything. I won't, dear. Not yet anyway. Time went on without any real incident, and then came the time my wife goes into labour. Didn't go smooth and ended up having to deliver with C-section, or whatever it's called, because daughter 2 was almost strangled by the umbilical cord. We had to stay 3 nights, excruciating nights due to a lot of things. Finally, we get to go home. Family had put a giant sign in our front yard welcoming the babies. The sign was already up for a few days prior to coming home, so our friendly neighbours definitely knew about it. But did they give a f***? No, they did not. From the first night on, they started to party and broad blasted their terror music. They started at noon and continued to until 5 or 6 in the morning. Classy. They also kept going for days, so it wasn't just Thursday. Sunday, it was all week long, and the next. So we were broken, hardly slept. One of our daughters suffered from heavy cramps combined with all the noise, and her parents at the end of their wits, so she cried a lot. And then I just had it. I researched some things on radio pirates, the laws and regulations, and on his large 5 mem-plus antenna in his backyard, which was illegal in itself, but he used it to illegally broadcast on radio, which meant he had a lot of equipment to do so, which was even more illegal and can even get you jailed. But at the very least, they could seize it all and fine him big time. In the 1045K area. Now, I did not immediately turn him in, but instead were looking for another house to lease first. This because I figured it wouldn't sit well with him and having a wife and 2 babies in the house alone during the day because I had to go to work. I hear you guys thinking, why not involve the police? Well, they are utterly useless in cases like this. We called once, and what they did disturbs me to this day. They rang at their doorbell and immediately started off by saying, we called them about noise complaints. Yes, you read that right. No protection or whatsoever. Just blatantly told them we were the reason they're there. Told them to keep it down, And that was it. They didn't even follow up with us or anything. As you can guess, douchebag now was even more pissed and told me the next day, or yelled over the fence that separates our backyards, that I really should not do that again. A threat yet again, of which I told the police. I didn't report it the first time as I chalked that up to alpha male and heat of the moment. But without witnesses to corroborate, nothing could be done yet again. Some days later, I walked out the front door and he just stepped out of his car. Came up to me demanding I cut back some of our ivy that grew on our side of the fence because it tangled in with his big-ass antenna. He would be gone for some hours, and I could come into his garden to cut back the ivy that grew through on their side. And then a light bulb went on above my head. I told him politely that I would do that immediately. Why? Because that gave me the opportunity to find out the make and model of this antenna to ascertain its signal strength, where the cables go exactly and what kind of cables they were, again to know the signal strength it handled. Also, it gave me a good view on the equipment he had through the window so I could snap some photographs of it. This was the icing on the cake, because in the meantime, we did manage to find a new home and already had signed the lease so we would be gone in 2 weeks. Luckily, we only had to paint some walls for the girls' room and furthermore, just pack up our things and move them to the other house. So after I trimmed the ivy and collected my evidence, I went online that night to find out the proper channels to report a broadcast pirate and which entity was tasked with catching said pirate. Turned out I had to call the telecom agency, but also the police. Wasn't too happy with the latter, but I remembered I have a nephew that works for the police. Officially, his area was immigration, but knew enough colleagues that could help us, and we could trust not to confront them again, saying I was the one that sent them. That was extremely important for our safety when doing what I was doing. So I gave both the agency and the police all evidence I collected, pointed them to the frequencies he pirated so they could listen in. Then they started a neighborhood investigation, which wasn't really necessary, but this was to cover our asses to make it look like he got caught by accident, because they had an active investigation in our area. You never know what he can learn from legal documents and such. We asked them to wait with the raid. Yes, they raid pirates' houses, preferably in the early hours of the day, because of his beauty sleep rendering him incapable of fleeing or hide evidence, etc. We moved 2 weeks later, and they raided him 2 days after we moved. All of his equipment, computers, radios, cell phones, and his car were seized. He left in cuffs, his wife GF did too, for making a big scene and tried to interfere. All of which was live reported to me by one of my ex-neighbours who were equally ecstatic about this. It turned out this wasn't the first time he got caught, but his third time. His car had no insurance on it and his MOT failed. This would normally have no big consequence because he didn't drive it while raided, but they had the guy surveilled on for a week, and that definitely meant he was seen driving it while not having insurance and valid MOT. He was fined somewhere around 30k euros, went to jail for 12 weeks, and everything seized was destroyed except the car. His GF had I do 40-some hours community service. They had to sell the house, which made for very happy neighbours as they too were over and done with them. Like I said, I do fight, but very dirty. You have to really make an effort for me to get to that point. They did and suffered. Over a year later, when shopping groceries, I encountered them. With the foulest of looks, if looks could kill, I'd be a smouldering heap of ash. But nothing more than that. Damn, folks. Kinda surprised about all the appreciation. Gold and silver awards, wholesome, masterpiece, helpful, bravo grande, and so many upvotes. Thank you all, kind people. I honestly do not know what I can do with gold or silver, but I promise you I'll spend it by giving back. Period in our lives turns into something better this way. This revenge was truly exemplary. OP's toxic neighbours got what they deserved. Their dismissive and arrogant behaviour finally backfired, sending them to jail, and they had to pay a hefty amount as fine. The next story is from PJ Murphy. The Long Game. TL. DR. Don't and you won't have to This is a long story, so settle back and relax. I love this sub and I have taken to asking friends about great revenge stories. This one comes from my boss, who lives in the small town where it occurred. To set the stage, many decades ago, Barney and Betty immigrated from Europe and bought a farm. A few years later, they had kids and sponsored Wilma from the old country as a nanny. She met Fred, a local boy, fell in love, and got married. Wilma stayed on as the nanny, and Fred worked as a farmhand. Their kids and Barney and Betty's kids grew up together, and it was pretty much a big blended family. Years go by, and Barney and Betty decide to sell the farm fields to Farmer Frank, but kept the land the house was on. They made enough off the sale to build a nice new house and rezoned the property lines. They broke the lot up into 2 parcels, one for the new house and one for the existing house, which they gifted to Fred and Wilma as a recognition of their years of dedicated and loving service. Both houses shared a well and a septic field. More time went by. Barney and Betty passed away, and their house was inherited by their son, Bam Bam. Fred also passed away, and Wilma stayed in the house. She was an angel. Everyone in the town knew and loved her. She was like the town's grandmother. She was active in the church and liked nothing more than crocheting booties for anyone in town that had a baby. Sadly, Wilma passed away too, and her house was inherited by her daughter, Pebbles. She was well established in a nearby metropolitan city and made the decision to sell the house. And so it begins. To give you a better idea of the setup, here is a rough diagram. The parcel for sale is the yellow bit, which backs onto protected parkland, and is bordered by Bam Bam's land and Farmer Frank's fields. It was purchased by a builder from the city, which we'll call Dick. The name suits him. He wanted it as a country getaway, as he already had a place in the city. He got approval to improve the place, and his plans were to convert the barn into a multi-car garage with a man cave and an apartment in what was the loft. He started by tearing down the house, with plans to replace it with a bigger, more modern house. The house was torn down, and the new build was started. The lower part of the yellow represents a very narrow driveway. Between that driveway and Farmer Frank's field was a drainage culvert. So the contractors started parking their vehicles on Bam Bam's lot. Bam Bam asked the contractors not to do it, but they didn't stop, so he approached Dick, and the conversation didn't go well. Dick was an entitled big shot, dealing with what he thought was a country bumpkin. To give you an idea, Dick once went to the local diner and asked for the wine list. He was aggressive and disrespectful, and this pretty much set the tone for all future interactions. Bam Bam had enough. These contractor trucks were tearing up his ground, so one weekend he built a fence along the border between his house and Dick's. It wasn't a complicated fence. He just got a buddy with a post-hole digger on his bobcat, sunk posts, and strung planks between them. This caused no end of trouble with the build. There was no room to park in the yellow for the contractors without getting in each other's way, and they couldn't park in the driveway, which was only wide enough for one vehicle at a time. Contractors were pissed off. They had a long walk from the road to the build site and had to carry tools and equipment back and forth, either that or take turns dropping materials. Waiting hours for the carpenters to finish unloading the lumber so that the plumbers could unload the pipes. Dick was furious and came stomping over to Bam Bam, demanding that he dismantle the fence. Bam Bam told him to go to hell. Then a day later, Bam Bam saw that someone had removed some of the fence, and the contractor trucks were back on his land. Okay, thought Bam Bam, let's play. The following weekend, Bam Bam irrigated the area where the contractors were parking. Irrigated it long and continuously. He probably had to get a water delivery to make it happen, as the well had a limited capacity. On Monday, the first contractor to arrive turned off Dick's driveway to go through the fence and immediately sank up to his axles in mud. Did I mention that Bam Bam owned the local service station and knew every tow truck company within 100 miles? As it turned out, everyone they called was too busy to pull the truck out, and they had to call a tow truck from the city, almost 2 hours away. You can see how the relationship between Bam Bam and Dick became somewhat less than neighborly. Time went by, and Dick's house was completed. It was a low-maintenance setup with interlocking brick over the compound, tall hedges separating Dick from Bam Bam. They kept out of each other's way, but they certainly weren't pals. Dick's kids would come up on the weekend and have a party now and then, but Bam Bam put up with it. One issue that arose was when Dick decided to fill the small swimming pool that he had installed. This drew the well dry and caused some sand to be pulled into the water treatment equipment. When Bam Bam approached Dick about the cost of the repair via email, Dick basically replied that it was Bam Bam's problem. The same when the septic holding tank needed to be pumped. Bam Bam offered to split the cost of the pumping, and Dick refused to part with a dime. Years passed, and Dick decided to list the house for sale. That's when Bam Bam made his move. He cut the water and capped the septic line leading from Dick's house. Then he informed the real estate agent of what he had done. Well, that induced a thunderstorm for sure. There's no way Dick could sell a house that had no water, or any way to dispose of waste. He couldn't build a septic field on his property, it was too small. He approached Farmer Frank to buy some of his land, but was rebuffed. His only option would have been to install a septic holding tank, but the only place to put it would have been right in the middle of his compound, and septic tanks can be aromatic. It would also have meant removing the in-ground pool. Dick tried to argue in court that he was entitled to access to the well water and the septic field, but Bam Bam won, arguing that the Wilma and Fred were given water and septic as a courtesy, and that there was no contractual obligation to provide Dick either well water or septic access. There was nothing in the deed to Wilma and Fred that could be grandfathered in, and Dick's emails refusing to pay for maintenance to either system was the nail in the coffin. The property sat vacant and unusable for months. The price dropped through the floor, and the few people that expressed an interest in the property approached Bam Bam with varying offers of cash to restore service. Bam Bam declined. No offers were made to Dick for the house. Finally, Dick did receive an offer from a numbered corporation, an offer that was about a quarter of the asking price. As is, with a statement that the buyer was aware that there was no water or septic service to the property. Without much choice, Dick accepted the offer. And that's how Bam Bam bought himself a beautiful modern country home, at a steal of a price. He reattached the water and septic in an afternoon and moved his furniture down the driveway. He rented his old house out for extra money and had the numbered company negotiate with himself for an arrangement for perpetual use of the well and septic, thereby jacking the value of the house by a factor of 4. Later, if he decides to sell it, he'll be making a massive profit. Bam Bam now enjoys a country paradise and is the social king of the hill in his town. All because Dick decided to be a dick. The revenge was perfect and executed brilliantly. OP patiently set up each move, letting Dick's own arrogance fuel his downfall. By legally cutting off water and septic access, OP created an impossible living situation, forcing Dick to sell at a huge loss. I would say the revenge was beyond perfect.